Welcome to It's a Woman's World, a show which looks at any and all topics under the sun from a woman's point of view. Hosted today by Ali Naithani.
Welcome to the show. I'll get started by introducing my co-host for the show today. First, we have Nava Johnson.
Hello.
Hello, Nava. We have Dr. Susan Strauss.
Hello, Ali.
And Janita Cathy, welcome.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Well, before we start our show, we have a celebration that we have to talk about and congratulate. I'm so proud to be at this table with such accomplished women. And Nava Johnson, congratulations to you. You just graduated
Thank you.
from Augsburg.
Thank you.
And you completed your degree in communication.
Yep, that's
And great. And how's it been? How do you feel now that you've graduated?
It's good. I'm still taking classes for this master's program. I'll be attending in 2016, so I'm not done with school, but it feels good to be done with that chapter of my life. Awesome.
Yeah. And on behalf of the show, we have this for you.
Gosh, thank you.
This is
Wow.
a picture of our show with some words around it and how much you mean to us.
Wow,
and
thank you so much.
our
I'm
sentiments
surprised.
for this
I didn't
great
know.
accomplishment. So
Wow, thank you.
absolutely. So
Appreciate
we'll
that.
pass
Signed
that
it
on
yet.
to you.
Signed it
And we have
Wow, thank you. I did
something
not
else
sus-
for you as well to say
Wow,
congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Let's see what that all is. Cookies.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness
Oh my
sakes.
gosh, yum.
Isn't
Okay.
that cute?
Were these your cookies? Both of yours?
Janita.
Favorable treats.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Yes.
Wow.
Very cute. Did a
Really
nice
nice.
job, Janita, in putting
beautiful.
that together.
Thank you.
But
Wow.
congratulations, how exciting.
Yes,
How
it's great
exciting.
news.
Thanks so
Would you
much.
like me to put this down
Sure.
underneath?
Thank you so much.
I can go change the world.
Yes.
Yes, that's
Good.
That's my
right.
plan. Yeah.
Make it better for women.
But stay with
Would you like
us
me to-
around the show, around the table, right?
Right. I'll be here, yes,
All
for
right.
sure, for
All
a
right.
good.
Do you want me to take that as well?
Thank you so much.
All right.
Wow,
Well,
thank you, everybody.
I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guests that are with us today. First of all, we have Barbara Battiste. Barbara is the director of the Minnesota Legislative Office on the Economic Status of Women. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yes. And we also have Comfort Dondo-Dewey with us. She is an intern at the program. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here.
All right.
It's so great to see you ladies again. Barbara, I had the awesome opportunity to come out and tour your office and learn a little bit more about what you do. For our viewers, can you just talk a little about your office, what your role is, and just kind of what you do or what services you provide?
Of course, of course. So my office is part of the state legislature. It's nonpartisan, and it started in the height of the women's movement back in about 1976. So it's been around 38 years. And what its mandate is to research and advise legislators on all issues that affect women's economic status. But what it became through the years also is a liaison between the legislature and those in the community that deal on women's economic issues.
Within the last couple of weeks, you had this phenomenal summit at the Capitol. Can you tell us what that was all about? I
Right.
had wanted to attend and I couldn't, but tell us about that.
You know, I'm so sorry you didn't attend because it was spectacular.
I heard it was.
It really was amazing. So it was a little over a week ago. It was the Women's Economic Summit. It was the second one. And last year was the first one, and I think you remember you had a show on this one time. I think they passed this landmark package of legislation for women's economic security, and that was sort of the kickoff. So the groups that were involved in that last year wanted to do it again this year, and it was co-hosted by my office and by the Minnesota Women's Coalition for Economic Security. But one thing we knew was that last year, because we were working so hard on that legislative package and time was really short, we really had not brought everybody at the table when we were putting the legislation together. And in particular, we had not brought the voices of Minnesota's women of color and immigrant women and
Yes.
indigenous women to the table. So we really wanted to do
Excellent.
that this year, and I know we'll
Excellent.
talk about that more, but it was, the women who were part of that summit were spectacular.
I think it's wise that women of color are able to express their voice, because some of their issues, while certainly all of us as women have similar issues, theirs are still going to be different, particularly immigrant women, and I think their voices need to be heard. And with that, Comfort, I'm curious, with you being from Zimbabwe, what is your background?
Absolutely. So I am originally from southern sub-Sahara Zimbabwe. I was born and raised. I moved to the United States when I was 18 for college, and I just moved by myself. I did not come with my family, so it was a
That
little
takes
adventure.
courage.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes. And so, like, just backing on what you just said about immigrant women, definitely my experiences have not been typical, and so it was wonderful to be a part of the summit and hear women, especially immigrant women and women of color in general, voicing their concerns, because they have diverse issues,
Yes.
depending on which community they come from. Yeah.
What were the common concerns that talked about during the summit?
The first one Barbara just addressed, not being at the table when policies are being made that affect them, and maybe if one-size-fits-all type policies being made and which don't meet their needs was the main one, and a lot of other very I guess diverse issues, but also even issues like, access to childcare, access to, jobs that pay well, access to transportation, among others, access to, immigration was one that also came up. So there were a lot of issues at the table, or in relation to women's economic status in Minnesota.
One voice I heard coming out very strongly, and we had on the panel representatives from the African American women's community, Liberian, Somali, Asian American, American Indian, and Latina. It was this amazing group. But everyone said loud and clear, they said, very well-meaning people look at the problems in our communities, and they devise solutions, and then they come to us and say, well, what do you think? And they say, you know what? We should be arriving at the solutions. We know the problems. We know the solutions. Don't come to us when you've already decided what the solutions will be.
Yes, which is kind of a no-brainer, isn't it?
It does seem, yes.
Yes.
It does, but it sort of fascinates me that it's wonderful that it was a panel of women of color. I'm certainly so happy about that. But to me, it's also like, well, why not? Like, well, why should that be something so? So I get it. I get why it's so phenomenal, and I'm so happy it happened. But is the mindset? Are we there here in Minnesota? Are we ready to really hear from the various groups? Do we have open ears? Do you feel like as you work through this process?
I wish if you had been there, it was amazing. I think it was testament to the women who were on the panel. They were smart, they were well-educated, strong, and eloquent. You could have heard a pin drop. There were about 300 people there, and what was wonderful, about 40% of them were people of color who were there, which was wonderful in and of itself. But people were just enthralled, and they were nodding their head, and they were, if you look at the tweets, and I'm really beginning to appreciate Twitter now because it's kind of in time, where people are saying, very influential people were saying things like, this is historic. And I think they really realize that, this is these aren't downtrodden communities. These are people who know what they're doing and hope, because that they're going to prevail, these women.
There's a lot of power, I think, in these women, and so it's so great to hear that came out in the summit. And in fact, we have some video of the summit, so why don't we just pause and take a look at the video from the summit? Okay.
Honestly, during this time, we made great progress, but it's still a patchwork in Minnesota. And James Madison once said that if men were angels, government would not be necessary. Well, I haven't seen men become any more angelic in my 38 years in government, so we have this inconsistency where some have adopted some very enlightened practices. I like to believe the state of Minnesota has been part of that, but there's still just such a long ways to go, and that's why your commitment for being here today and our commitment to continue to work together. I really commend the legislative leaders who are here for the Women's Economic Security Act last year. That was a big milestone and a long step forward to where we ought to be. But as I said, so much of it is still left at the discretion of employers, some of whom are enlightened and some of whom have a ways to go.
So the other women that in the Somali community that I worry a lot about are the young ones that who migrated 20 years into this country at the age of 6 or 7 years old, who are in their 20s, early 30s, who have just finished college and they're in workforce, and they are really, really struggling, including me. When you have your mother living with you or away from you, she calls you and she says, I have a doctor's appointment, I want you to take me there because this is very important. Well, employers, how many times will an employer allow that? So those are some of the struggles. And I'm seeing the red lights on and stuff, but I'm not.
I think the strengths in the Asian American community are that really women value their heritage and often are the keepers of their histories and cultures. This is true for many communities, but it's certainly true for the Asian American community. We are a resilient community, and that has endured generations of sanctioned racial prejudice in this country, right? So, in particular for Asian women, anything from the Chinese Exclusion Act to the Japanese internment to now even the way that our immigration system works and bringing in highly educated workers, which mostly are men, and then women are left behind. And then also Minnesota happens to be one of the most creative places in the country for Asian American artists, and a lot of that is being led by Asian American women artists who are really active here. So women play a really strong role in being advocates for their community's needs, and I hope that that's something that we can continue to build on. And then lastly, Asian Americans have strong familial connections, and they're the most likely to live in multi-generational housing. So almost 30% live in at least 2 generations or more.
My mother turned 100 last month. So she is possibly the oldest Asian American woman in the state, and possibly in the country. A few months after her citizenship, I noticed that she was sort of carrying her shoulder, in a funny way and sort of looking a little pained. She does not complain. She never tells me if anything is wrong with her. Whether or not this is just her or cultural and traditional, I think, devaluation of many Asian women, and we can expand that to other places. So I dragged her off to the ER, and she was in hospital for about 4 days. Then I received a bill for about $6,000, and I'm going like, what? How? What? I'm not low income, I'm mid-income. I have a full-time job, my husband has a full-time job, but I was realizing this was a beginning of something that could easily get out of control. What am I going to do? It would have been easier for me to take both of us back to Singapore and have her taken care of there because of subsidized medical care in Singapore. Singapore, has, people are the assets. Therefore you value people, therefore you subsidize health care for people.
And as legislators, much of what we do is born out of personal experience. And that's why, and let me just say, that's why we need more women in the legislature. Minnesota is, in some cases, leading the nation. We're about 4th as far as the percent of women in our legislature, but we still are not at what would be called parity. I think we're making great strides thanks to folks like you and the people on this panel, but there is still more work to do.
And so I changed how I operated with my business, and I tried to find out how I could take away stresses from my employees so that they could actually feel good about coming to work and not have to worry about those small details. The first thing that I did, and trust me, every year I have to go through this, I decided I am paying 100% of my employees' medical, dental benefits. And it's just not my employees. I pay also for their dependents. I pay everything. So they do not pay anything, ever, out of pocket. That is something that I have done for 10 years. My bank doesn't want me to. My insurance company keeps saying, maybe you should look at a cheaper method. And I said, no, that is not going to change. You come up with something more creative that will save my company money, but do not take away anything that my employees get today. So you got to find something you can work with.
The common thread is that women need transportation for themselves and for their families to get to places safely and efficiently. So as you know, and you're probably fit in these categories too, women often are primary caregivers for family members, young and old. They often make 80 cents on the dollar as a man makes for the same job. They run a household, they may be a head of a household, or they might be the primary care earners in their families. They run many of their family errands and often are taxis for their families. And they make up 2/3 of the minimum wage jobs in Minnesota. And disproportionately, women in their elder years live in poverty disproportionately to men. So this is a very timely topic at this summit because our transportation system is crumbling. So now is the time to make the kind of changes we need in Minnesota. And we need women at the table, and we need women's voices heard.
I want to just take a moment to say congratulations on putting together an event that is historic. It's your second year. It's just bringing the voices together. I think first people realizing that that voice is out there and bringing it to the table, and then now being able to impact change or shape even what policies we discuss or we talk about. So congratulations to a job well done. I know it was a lot of different organizations that came together to make it successful, but just congratulations to your office for really taking that leadership role and bringing so many different women and men together to really address the economic status of women in our state.
Thank you. It was a typical women's collaboration, though, in that we never have people to do things. So, every group, the people were really, all the women rolled up their sleeves and all worked together on it. And the communities of color, can you imagine, like 7, 8 communities of color coming together, and they were totally in charge of planning.
Awesome. And Comfort, how did you get involved with the Office on the Economic Status of Women? How did you know of the internship opportunity? Tell us a little bit about that, because you're a senior at St. Kate's right now.
Yeah, great question. I actually, my junior year, I did some work with the Children's Defense Fund, and so that's when I started getting interested in policy. My senior internship was not in policy, so I realized it was not my passion. So I did my own research, and I found my internship through St. Catherine University. Their career office helped me, and I really have to give Barbara the credit because a lot of the logistics were not allowing me to do the internship. But she worked hard. We connected well to get me into her office.
Great.
Yeah.
You can understand, I felt blessed when Comfort came across my door.
I bet. What are you hoping to do now with gaining this experience with Barbara and with the office? What are you hoping to do with your life as a result?
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to graduating in May. It's quite a journey.
Yes.
And I just started my application process. I'm applying to several schools, including Harvard Law School.
Oh, good for you.
Yes, and so that is my long-term goal.
To be a lawyer.
Yes, to be a lawyer, and actually, above all, to be a policymaker.
Okay.
Because I've realized as I'm sitting in some of the hearings at the Capitol, there's a big number of populations that are not represented at the policy level. And I think my other long-term goal is to mobilize women of color to be at the table.
And so are you planning on doing this here in the States or going back to Zimbabwe?
I plan to do both.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, I plan to do both. I'm quite the visionary, and I'm hoping to do global work as well as here. I think you can do both.
Young women these days have so many opportunities that avail themselves to you that back in my day, it was, you're a nurse or a teacher, and that was about it. And now, what you're saying that you want to do, it's like, I would like to do that. It sounds wonderful. And that wasn't even on the horizon back in my day. So good luck to you.
Thank you. And I should say, though, women, your generation did most of the groundwork for us to be able to have the opportunity.
Yes.
So thank you for that.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
thanks.
Wow.
That's nice of you to say. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
You know, it says a lot using your own personal story of being 18, making a huge decision. I mean, you think about 18, we're trying to figure out, do I want to drive a automatic car or a stick
that's
shift?
right.
Now that I have my license. But for you to make that big choice to move clear across the world, to come here because you want to pursue an education, not only did you come to do that now, you've noticed in your time here that, there's some voices missing in decision making in this country that I'm brand new to. And you've owned it, and now you've created this path, this vision to now make an impact and a change. So that just says a lot to you, but also to other women that may feel like they don't know where to start, or they don't know what they can say, or they don't think anybody cares. If you just have a dream, if you just have a vision, would you say? I mean, I think about people just in a lot of communities of color. They're not at the table, and not because they don't want to sometimes, because they don't know where do I start?
And how do I
Or
do it?
do they even care?
Right.
Or I'm so discouraged, I'm not going to worry about it.
Yes.
But you're a clear example that
Excuse me.
you can make a difference.
Yeah, and backing on that, Barbara, I know that Comfort is here to learn from you and what your office and your expertise is.
Right?
But I'm wondering, what are you learning from her, particularly with her background from Zimbabwe and then being involved in the summit with, women of color? So I'm just curious what you're gleaning from her expertise.
Actually a lot. And I have a daughter about Comfort's age, a little older. And so when you see these young women who are, we were innately smart, but they're smarter.
Yeah.
They're us, but they're so better, so much better. What I'm learning from her, she was in charge of reaching out to media that targets communities of color. So here she is, a young woman stepping into this, and she just took charge. And she did. She knew whom to contact, and she was very confident, much more confident than I think a lot of us were when we were young women.
Yes.
Also, when I talk to her about her background, one thing, in addition to her courage, I think Comfort must have an extraordinary mother to have raised somebody so strong, but also Comfort has sisters who are also very well educated and very strong. And it's this passing on the strength from one generation to another.
Yes.
Girl power.
Yes.
So, Barbara, this was the second summit. Now what? What's next? What do we do now?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because we have a big conference call of everybody who was involved in the Women of Color panel. We did have some other wonderful sessions as well, but I won't go into those now. But we have a conference call tomorrow to say, what are the next step? We have to build on this momentum, and what can we do? And Comfort actually has some really interesting ideas. And one thing I'm thinking of is my office can call legislative hearings. They can't take official action, but we can do that. And I'm thinking during the interim, so from late May through the end of the year, I can call legislative hearings, and I sort of have the power to get more legislators there. And I'm thinking of this time doing community by community. So the Liberian women will have one whole hearing where they will talk about their
Wonderful
community
idea.
and the American Indian women. So I'm kind of thinking of that. But Comfort, maybe you can talk about some of the things you're thinking about.
We're just talking about that on our way here with Barbara. My hope was to bring women of color who are in leadership roles, for example, who have their own organizations, to mobilize the women within their own communities. So maybe offering trainings, to better the economic status of women, and then just continue the conversation and keep those conference calls on an ongoing basis until the next year's summit. Yeah.
What do you see? This is an example of your next steps, but I guess even looking perhaps with a bigger umbrella, what is the outcome of the summit ideally? What would you like to think that the summit was the catalyst for? And that's the one question. But then to couple with that, how can the summit be a catalyst not just for the legislative, but what can we do as individual women to get women's economic power where it should be?
You know, the main target of the summit is to talk to legislators, to have them hear from women what the economic issues are and what solutions are. What I saw coming out of this summit, major things, you know, one is they're really realizing how eloquent and strong these women of color are, and I think that they will now be ready to seek out these women and say, talk to us. And we talked about transportation as a women's issue. I think that that is really coming to the forefront a lot because of the summit, and about caregiving and the fact that caregivers are in the workplace. And as individual women, each one of you, it is, to me, continually surprising how one voice in Minnesota's legislature can really make a difference. You know, we have a very clean legislature. It's very open to the public. And if you just keep talking out one person, you can change the conversation. And I believe the summit started to do that.
That's encouraging to hear.
One conversation, and one thing I was wondering was, as you reached out to these women, Comfort, did you get immediate yeses? Were they excited, or did you have to do some convincing and some discussion? And I'm just curious about that process.
Absolutely, great question. When it comes to issues of policy, I think it's kind of the pink elephant in the room. A lot of people don't understand that actually it breaks down to, as Barbara said, we have a very clean legislature. They're very open. So I think you have to go. I've been changing my tactics with most of the women I'm trying to reach out to, and just break it down in layman terms and not try to use any kind of fancy language with them, and then maybe just explaining to them the process. And they've been really open, you know, to seeing the big picture. Yes, I cannot say there have been a lot of skeptics. Yeah, they've been really open.
Because with that power, as you talked about, Barbara, I would think that if we could get these women to be energized and to be there and to see the value, they'll get other women behind them coming too. And wow, what a change we could make.
And you know, and there were 3 very strong women who were the main planners for the Women of Color session. There was Fortune Welly, who's with Isaroon, which is a Somali women's organization, Kenya McKnight, who's with the Black Women's Business Alliance, and Bo Tal Urabi, who's with Asian American Pacific Islanders in philanthropy. But they then were the ones who reached out to all the other women and brought them in, so that they actually had a working group of maybe 12, 15 women, all from different communities of color.
That's exciting.
It is.
It was very exciting.
You know, and I think the legislative process can be somewhat intimidating to like just the average person. But what I'm sort of hearing from the summit is that it's about storytelling. If you really want to impact what laws are passed, what laws are made, we each have a story, and our story can be that one thing that can get a yes or a no vote. So if we can even think in that process, that yes, it can be intimidating, but really what it gets down to is a story. Because everybody can relate to a story. We're a log. We can get lost in that. But everybody can relate to a story. If I didn't live in your shoes, I probably know somebody that might have a similar story, and it creates a reaction in me, which then hopefully creates change.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
And even like that, when you said you may not walk in her shoes, but the similarities, even though you didn't, I think with a summit like this, you do see the similarities even among the different communities of color with white women, and as women in general, that we do have a commonality, but we do have those differences, which are the beauty of diversity and of our yes, the potpourri, I like that, of our world.
Well, Barbara and Comfort, you know, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
We wish you all the best as you move forward, and comfort to you as you pursue your educational aspirations.
Thank you.
And we thank you for being with us today on It's a Woman's World, and we hope to see you next time.